Clara Whitcomb stood barefoot on the frozen platform, while the train agent held her valise above the crowd like evidence of a crime. A banker's daughter, with no fare, no guardian, and no roof, Silas Hobb called, his voice sharp enough to cut through the steam. Who will pay her debt and take responsibility for her? Men laughed behind their gloves. Women turned their faces away. Clara's cheeks burned, but she did not beg. Then a quiet cowboy stepped out of the blowing cinders, rain dark on his coat, one hand resting on a saddle-worn hat. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at her as if she were ruined. He looked at the agent. "Put the lady's bag down," he said. "Before we ride into this story, let me know what country you are watching from. Comment your country below, and subscribe if you love emotional cowboy stories about shame, rescue, forgiveness, and second chances." The train had left Clara Whitcomb behind like refuse. It pulled away from the depot in a shriek of iron and steam, dragging its yellow-lit windows into the gray afternoon, each window a square of warmth she could no longer afford. Smoke rolled low across the platform. Rain mixed with cinders and stuck to her hem. The wind came down from the high plains with the bitter patience of November, lifting the torn edge of her shawl and pressing cold fingers through the worn seams of her dress. She had owned 3 silk dresses once. Her father had ordered them from St. Louis the year the bank placed its new sign above the brick front on La Salle Street. She remembered him standing beneath that sign in a black coat, bowing to widows and ranchers and miners, promising their savings were safer with him than buried under floorboards. Now his name was whispered like a curse. Whitcomb Bank had closed its doors in the middle of harvest season. Men had pounded on the glass until the sheriff came. Women had wept in the street with passbooks clutched in their hands. Her father had died 3 days later, seated at his desk, with ink on his fingers and a letter half written before him. Some called it apoplexy. Some called it judgment. Clara had buried him in a borrowed veil and sold the house before the mourners finished accusing him. She had taken the train west because she had nowhere else to go. A woman in Omaha had said there might be work in Mercy Ridge, Wyoming territory. Laundry, mending, schoolroom assistants, anything honest. Clara had bought a ticket with the last money stitched into her cuff. 2 towns before Mercy Ridge, a porter had claimed her fare was short. At Mercy Ridge, Silas Hobb, the train agent, had made a theater of it. He was a narrow man, with a polished mustache and a watch chain that flashed whenever he moved. He had found her name in newspapers, or pretended to. He held her valise in one hand and a folded notice in the other. "Miss Clara Whitcomb," he said, loud enough for the platform to hear. "Daughter of Elias Whitcomb, late banker of St. Joseph. Seems debt follows this family like a dog." Clara's stomach had tightened so hard she could barely breathe. "I paid my fare." "You paid part," he said, "and you rode with baggage beyond your class. My trunk was taken in Cheyenne. Then you have fewer goods to cover the balance." A few men laughed. One spat tobacco between the planks. There were perhaps 30 people gathered under the depot roof, kept there by the rain and their appetite for disgrace. Mercy Ridge had one muddy street, a church steeple, a livery, a mercantile, and a row of false front buildings painted brighter than the weather deserved. Clara had seen the town from the train window and thought it might forgive a stranger. Now it stared at her as if she had brought her father's ruined ledgers in her hands. Silas Hobb lifted her valise. "Here is the arrangement," he announced. "Miss Whitcomb owes the rail office $8.40. She has no escort, no purse, no employment. Any respectable household willing to settle the account might claim her service until the debt is repaid." Clara's face went numb. "Service?" she asked. "Labor," he said. "Kitchen, laundry, sewing, whatever household requires. Unless some gentleman wants a wife cheap enough to start with a debt, The laugh that rose from the men near the freight door was not loud. It was worse. It was small and hungry. Clara took a step backward. Rain struck her hair and slid under her collar. She would have run if her shoes had not been soaked through, if her knees had not trembled, if pride had not nailed her to the platform. She had been hungry for 2 days. She had slept sitting upright on a bench while soldiers snored around her. She had told herself that dignity could survive poverty if a person stood straight enough. But dignity, she discovered, did not warm cold feet. Silas spread his arms. Who bids on a settlement? A miner called. I'll take her for the washing if she knows soap from lye. A cattle buyer said. Banker's girl might keep books if she don't steal the ink. Another voice, lower, said, $8 is too much for trouble. Clara shut her eyes. Then boots sounded on the wet planks. No hurry, no swagger, just the steady approach of a man who had crossed worse weather and did not consider cruelty worth pausing before. Put the lady's bag down. The depot quieted. Clara opened her eyes. The cowboy stood just beyond the edge of the roof, rain running from the brim of his hat. He was tall, lean, and wind-brown, with a plain brown coat, dark at the shoulders, and a gray horse waiting behind him near the hitching rail. His jaw was rough with 2 days' beard. His eyes were not soft exactly. They were still, the way deep water looks still before it moves. Silas Hobb turned, annoyed. This is rail office business, then conduct it like business, the cowboy said. Not like a livestock pen. A murmur passed through the crowd. The agent's smile thinned. You settling the debt? The cowboy reached into his coat and drew out a folded bill. $8.40. Clara felt heat rush to her cheeks, sharper than shame. No, she said. I did not ask you. The cowboy looked at her then, and the look undid her more than any insult had. There was no pity in it, no claiming, only acknowledgement. No, ma'am, he said. You didn't. He handed the money to Silas. The agent held the bill up to the light. And what do you expect for it, Mr. Vale? So the cowboy had a name. Vale. Receipt, he said. A woman near the depot door gave a faint sound that might have been approval. Another whispered, That's Nathaniel Vale from Cold Creek. Silas wrote slowly, as if each letter offended him. You understand, Vale, the woman has no placement. If she becomes chargeable to the town, she won. Clara's pride rose like a wounded thing. You cannot know that? No, Nathaniel Vale said. But he doesn't know the rest either. Silas shoved the receipt across the counter. Nathaniel took it and extended it toward Clara. She did not reach for it. Rain beat the depot roof. Somewhere a horse stamped in the mud. The crowd waited, disappointed that she had not fainted or thanked him proudly. Clara forced her hand up and took the receipt. Her fingers brushed his glove. The leather was cold. Your debt is to no man now, he said. Silas gave a dry laugh. Noble words. But she still has no bed. Nathaniel turned toward the town street. Mrs. Pike keeps room. Mrs. Pike keeps rooms for paying guests, someone said. Clara looked down at the receipt until the ink blurred. $8.40. The price of being displayed. The price of being removed from one man's power and placed before another's choice. I will repay you, she said. Nathaniel nodded once. I expect you will. That answer steadied her. Not because it was kind, though it was. Because it took her seriously. It treated repayment not as a fantasy, but as a fact that had not happened yet. He bent, lifted her valise from where Silas had finally dropped it, and set it at her feet instead of carrying it away. The gesture was small. It gave her the choice to pick it up herself. Clara took the handle. Her arm trembled under the weight. Nathaniel noticed but did not move to shame her with help. He only stepped down from the platform and waited beside his horse while she gathered the torn edges of herself. Behind them, the crowd began to break apart, but the judgment did not. It moved with her down the muddy street from window to window, from porch to porch, riding the whisper of her father's name, Whitcomb, banker's daughter, that girl, bought at the depot. And though Nathaniel Vale walked 3 paces ahead, quiet as fence shadow, Clara understood that the auction had not ended. It had only changed stages. Mrs. Pike's boarding house smelled of boiled cabbage, lamp oil, and suspicion. It stood beside the mercantile, with lace curtains yellowed by coal smoke, and a porch that sagged in the middle like a tired mouth. Mrs. Pike herself was a square woman, in a black dress, with a face sharpened by years of watching people fail to pay. She opened the door only wide enough to inspect Clara from bonnet to hem. "Full," she said. Nathaniel stood at the bottom of the steps, hat in hand. "There are 2 empty windows upstairs. Those rooms are spoken for." "By who?" "By decent uncertainty." Clara's fingers tightened around the valise handle. "I have some sewing skill," she said. "I could mend linens in exchange for a corner until I find wages." Mrs. Pike's eyes flicked toward Nathaniel. "I asked she under your protection," Clara answered before he could. "I am under my own." Mrs. Pike's mouth curled. That is often what women say just before asking the town to feed them. Nathaniel's voice stayed low. "She asked for work. She came off a train with a scandal behind her. Scandal is not contagious. In a town this size, Mr. Vale, everything is contagious." Clara felt the porch tilt beneath her. Hunger had thinned the world to edges. The smell of cabbage, which should have repelled her, made her mouth water. She had eaten half a biscuit the day before and nothing since dawn. Pride could hold the spine upright, but it could not quiet the belly. Mrs. Pike saw the weakness and softened only enough to become more dangerous. "There is a shed behind the wash house. Dry enough. She can sleep there if you pay 2 bits." Nathaniel looked at Clara. Again, the choice was left with her. The shed meant rats, cold, and the acceptance that she was not quite a guest. But the rain had turned to sleet, ticking against porch boards like thrown sand. "I will take it," Clara said. "For one night." Nathaniel put a coin on the rail. "I will repay that too," she added. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Pike snorted. Added to the ledger of miracles, the shed had a dirt floor, a cracked wall, and a cot with a rope net sagging under a flour sack mattress. Clara set her valise down and stared at it. Inside were 2 dresses, a comb, her father's watch, a Bible with her mother's name written in the front, and a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. The letters were from people who had once praised Elias Whitcomb for his honesty. She had kept them because grief sometimes needed proof that the dead had not always been despised. Nathaniel paused in the doorway but did not step inside. "There's a cafe across the street," he said. "Mrs. Pike won't serve after 7. I'm not hungry." Her stomach betrayed her with a faint, painful sound. Nathaniel did not smile. I am startled. "I don't favor eating alone in town," he said. It was an invitation shaped carefully enough that she could refuse without disgrace. Clara's throat tightened. "I have no money." "You have a debt already," he said. "One more bowl of stew won't ruin the arithmetic." She wanted to hate him for seeing so much. Instead, she hated herself for needing the kindness. The cafe was called the Blue Plate, though all the plates were chipped white. The room fell quiet when Nathaniel opened the door for her. Men at 3 tables turned. A boy sweeping near the stove stopped mid-stroke. Behind the counter, a thin woman with red hands narrowed her eyes. Nathaniel chose the table nearest the window, in full view of everyone. Not hidden in a corner, not tucked away like shame. Clara sat with her back straight and her wet shoes under her skirt. 2 stews, Nathaniel said. The woman behind the counter did not move. "Cash." He laid coins down. "From your pocket?" she asked. "Usually where I keep it." A few men chuckled uneasily. But Nathaniel's face did not change. The woman took the coins and brought 2 bowls, bread and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. Clara waited until Nathaniel lifted his spoon before she touched hers. The stew was mostly potatoes and onion, with a trace of beef that seemed holy after hunger. She ate slowly at first, then had to stop herself from rushing. Nathaniel tore his bread in half and placed the larger piece near her bowl without comment. She looked at it. "I cannot keep taking," she said. "Then don't think of it as taking. What should I think of it as? Staying alive until morning." The bluntness nearly broke her. Across the room, 2 men were talking too loudly. Whitcomb, that was the name. Bank folded and took half the county with it. Daughter's got fine hands for poverty. My baby, she knows where the money went. Son set her spoon down. Nathaniel did not turn around. He only said, "Names carry weight in this room." The men quieted. One of them muttered, "We're only speaking truth." Nathaniel looked at him then. Truth doesn't need a coward's grin. The silence afterward was thick. Clara felt everyone watching for her reaction. She wanted to vanish. She wanted to stand and tell them her father had not been a thief, though she no longer knew how to prove it. She wanted to ask Nathaniel not to defend her, because defense made her visible. Instead, she picked up her spoon and finished the stew. That was the first respect she could offer him, not wasting what his money had bought. After supper, the sleet had worsened. Nathaniel walked with her as far as the boarding house gate. The town lamps shivered in the wet wind. Mud sucked at her shoes. "Coal Creek is 6 miles out," he said. "I ride there tonight." "Then you should go." He untied his coat and held it out. She stepped back. "No, you'll freeze in that shed." "So will you without it." "I have wool under this. You have pride under yours. Mine warms better." The corner of her mouth moved before she could stop it. Not a smile, but the memory of one. She took the coat. It smelled of rain, horse, cedar smoke, and open air. He did not watch her put it on. "I need work," she said. "I know. I can sew, tally accounts, read contracts, keep books, teach sums, clean, cook poorly but improve when corrected." That's a long advertisement. "It is survival." Nathaniel nodded toward the church. "Reverend Bell's wife has 6 children and more mending than Mercy. I can ask. I would rather ask myself. Then I'll point out the house." He did, with no argument. Then he mounted his gray horse beneath the livery lantern. Clara stood in his coat and watched him ride into the sleet. She knew almost nothing about him, except that he had money enough to save a stranger and manners enough not to claim her afterward. In Mercy Ridge, that might be rarer than wealth. The shed was colder than she feared. Wind came through the wall, lifting dust from the dirt floor. She lay on the cot fully dressed, wrapped in Nathaniel's coat, her valise beneath her hand. The hunger had eased, leaving exhaustion in its place. But sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Silas Hobbs' voice. Who will pay her debt and take responsibility for her? She pressed the receipt flat against her chest. "Mine," she whispered into the dark. "My responsibility is mine." Outside, sleet struck the roof. Somewhere in the boarding house, a woman laughed. Somewhere farther out, Nathaniel Vale rode through weather he had not needed to face. Having given his coat to a woman the town had already priced. Clara did not love him. She did not trust him. But for the first time since her father's grave, she believed morning might arrive with more than disgrace waiting for her. Morning came blue and hard, with ice shining on the pump handle, and the town street rutted stiff beneath wagon wheels. Clara returned Nathaniel's coat by leaving it folded over the Coal Creek Ranch hitching post, because she had risen before dawn and followed his directions to Reverend Bell's house, instead of waiting to be rescued a second time. The walk was cold enough to burn her lungs. Twice she had to stop and press a hand against a fence until dizziness passed. But she reached the white parsonage as smoke began to lift from its chimney. Mrs. Bell opened the door with a baby on her hip and a toddler clinging to her skirt. Two older children peered around her. Another child cried somewhere inside. "See Clara Whitcomb," Clara said before courage thinned. "I was told you might have mending." Mrs. Bell's tired eyes sharpened at the name, then softened at the sight of Clara's hands, bare and red from cold. "I have mending enough to convert a sinner," she said. "Can you take payment in breakfast and a promise of going after Sunday collection?" Clara's knees nearly weakened from gratitude. Yes, by mid-morning, she sat beside the parsonage stove with a basket of torn stockings, split seams, and children's shirts worn thin at the elbows. The Bell children stared at her openly until she asked the eldest boy to thread needles. He was 7, solemn, and proud to be useful. Nathaniel arrived near noon with a sack of oats over one shoulder and a repaired hinge in his hand. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her. She stood. "Your coat is at your ranch gate." "So I saw. I did not wish to keep it. I didn't think." Mrs. Bell looked between them, but asked no questions. She was a merciful woman, or too tired for gossip. Nathaniel fixed the pantry hinge while Clara sewed. The room warmed with small domestic sounds. The scrape of chair legs, the baby's breathy sleep, the pop of stove wood, the whisper of thread through cloth. No one mentioned the depot. No one said bought. No one said banker's daughter as if it were a stain. At noon, Mrs. Bell put bean soup on the table. Clara took the smallest portion. Nathaniel noticed and slid the bread plate closer to her. "Not charity," he said under his breath. She looked down at the needle pricks on her fingers. "What is it then?" "Lunch." It was such a plain answer that she almost laughed, and that almost frightened her more than sorrow. Laughter belonged to women who knew where they would sleep. After the meal, Mrs. Bell sent Clara to the wash line with little Ruth, a child of 5 with dark braids and a serious mouth. Ruth carried clothespins in her apron and studied Clara as if she were a puzzle. "Are you the lady from the train?" Ruth asked. Clara pinned a shirt carefully. "I arrived by train. Tommy said Mr. Hobbs sold you." Clara's fingers stilled. The child looked ashamed of the question, but too young to hide curiosity. "No," Clara said gently. "Mr. Hobbs tried to shame me over money. That is different from owning me. Can people buy people? Not good people." Ruth considered this. "Mr. Vale is good people." Clara glanced toward the house, where Nathaniel's shape crossed behind the window. "He seems to be. He brought my mama flour when Papa was sick. He said not to tell, but I did." This time Clara did smile faintly. By evening she had mended enough to earn 2 meals, a cot beside the parsonage kitchen for 3 nights, and Mrs. Bell's promise to speak to the school board about temporary help. Clara should have felt relief. Instead, each kindness carried a hook. A room could be lost, work could dry up, a name could close doors before she reached them. On the 3rd day, snow began. It came soft at first, then thick, whitening the roofs and muting the town's hard edges. Clara was carrying a basket of finished laundry back from the Bell wash house when she saw Silas Hobbs speaking to 2 men outside the rail office. He smiled when he noticed her. "Miss Whitcomb," he called. Finding the town charitable, she kept walking. He stepped into her path. "I have received inquiry about your father's remaining papers." Clara stopped. "What inquiry?" "A man from Cheyenne claims your father transferred funds west before the bank failed." "My father did no such thing." Silas' smile remained. "Conviction is cheaper than proof," one of the men beside him said. "Might be she brought bank money in that valise." The other laughed. Clara's hands tightened around the laundry basket until her knuckles ached. Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. "Move aside." Silas turned slowly. "Mr. Vale, You appear whenever there's a woman to impress. Nathaniel was leading his gray horse, saddle loaded with supplies. Snow gathered on his hat brim. Roads narrow. The road is public. So is your foolishness, but I don't block traffic with it. A few bystanders heard and paused. Clara wished the ground would open, not from shame this time, but from dread that Nathaniel would be dragged into her ruin. His reputation was his own. His ranch was his own. Mercy Ridge would forgive a man for that sooner than for choosing the wrong woman to defend. She shifted the basket. I can pass. Nathaniel looked at Silas. Silas stepped aside. But as Clara moved past, he said softly, ask your cowboy why he pays debts so quick. Men with empty houses often buy what they cannot ask for. Clara flinched despite herself. Nathaniel heard. Everyone near enough heard. For the first time, anger changed his face. He handed his horse's reins to a boy and walked back to Silas. He did not strike him. He did not shout. He stood so close the agent had to lift his chin. Say her name with respect, Nathaniel said. Silo, or what? Or say mine beside it and answer me in front of every man you've lied to. The snow fell between them. Silas looked away first. That night Mrs. Bell told Clara the school board had agreed to hire her for 2 weeks to help the younger children with letters and sums, provided there was no trouble. No trouble, Clara repeated. Mrs. Bell folded a towel. In Mercy Ridge, dear, that means no gossip powerful men dislike. Clara lay awake long after the parsonage quieted. She thought of Nathaniel standing in the snow. She thought of Silas' words, poisonous because they found her fear. Men with empty houses often buy what they cannot ask for. Nathaniel had not asked for anything. That was why she feared owing him most. The next morning, she walked to Coal Creek Ranch with the $8.40 wrapped in cloth. She had earned only $3.10 so far, but Mrs. Bell had advanced the rest against future mending. Clara hated borrowing to repay a debt, but she hated the receipt more. Coal Creek sat in a shallow valley where a creek cut black through snow-dusted grass. The ranch house was modest, built of weathered logs with a stone chimney and a porch swept clean iron. A barn stood beyond it, red paint faded by years of sun. Cattle moved like dark stones along the ridge. Nathaniel was splitting wood near the barn. He paused when she approached. She held out the cloth bundle. Your money. He wiped his hands on his coat before taking it. That was quick. I prefer quick when my name is attached to a man's pocket. He weighed the bundle, but did not open it. You walked out here alone? Yes. Road's not kind after snow. It did not insult me. A faint warmth crossed his eyes. From the barn came a small voice. Uncle Nathaniel, the calf want drink. A little girl of about 8 appeared, wearing a boy's coat too large for her and boots muddy to the ankle. She had Nathaniel's steady eyes and a face too guarded for childhood. This is my niece, Anna, Nathaniel said. Anna, Miss Whitcomb. Anna stared. Are you a teacher? For 2 weeks, if the board does not change its mind. My letters are bad, Anna said. Letters are rarely bad. They are only stubborn. Anna considered this with grave approval. Can you make them behave? Clara looked at Nathaniel. If your uncle permits, Nathaniel's expression changed almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. A door inside him had opened a fraction. Anna could use help, he said. I charge fair wages, Clara replied. I pay fair. So it began not with romance, not with confession, not with a rescued woman falling into a cowboy's arms, but with a child's slate on a ranch table, a pot of coffee warming on the stove, and Clara Whitcomb earning 1 honest coin at a time, while Nathaniel Vale worked outside and never once called her charity. Coal Creek Ranch taught Clara the difference between silence and emptiness. At first she thought Nathaniel's quiet came from loneliness. But loneliness makes noise in a house. It sighs in chairs and slams doors and leaves cups unwashed. Nathaniel's silence had order. The woodbox was filled before dawn, harness hung cleaned and oiled, and his coat was patched at the elbows. The kitchen shelves held flour, beans, coffee, dried apples, and one blue cup with a crack down the side that Anna always chose. Clara came 3 afternoons a week after school. She taught Anna letters, then sums, then reading from a primer with half its pages loose. Anna resisted at first, not with disobedience, but with expectation. She expected adults to tire of her. She expected correction to become anger. She expected praise to be a trick. Clara recognized that expectation, shame, and grief had similar lessons. One afternoon, Anna wrote her name in full, without reversing the second N. She stared at the slate, as if it might disappear. "That is yours," Clara said. Anna touched the letters. "My mama wrote pretty." Nathaniel, who had entered with an armload of kindling, went still. Clara kept her voice gentle. "What was her name?" "Mary," Anna said. "She died when the fever came. Papa too. Uncle Nathaniel took me, but folks said he ought to send me east." Nathaniel set the kindling down. "Folks say many things when no work is required of them," Clara said. Anna looked up. "Did folks say things about you? Did they hurt? Yes. What did you do?" Clara considered her lying, then chose respect. "Some days I stood straight, some days I cried, where no one could see. Both were allowed." Anna nodded with the solemn relief of a child given permission to be human. Nathaniel turned toward the stove, but not before Clara saw his hand tighten on the kindling. That evening, a storm rolled over the valley before Clara could return to town. Wind drove snow sideways until the road vanished. Nathaniel stood at the window, jaw set. "You'll stay here," he said. Clara's back stiffened. He heard the error at once. "Forgive me, that wasn't a command. The road's unsafe, and this room has 2 beds. Door locks from inside. I'll sleep in the barn if you prefer." The care with which he placed her safety above his comfort loosened something painful in her chest. "The kitchen chair will not accuse you of wrongdoing if you sleep in it," she said. "Mrs. Pike might. Mrs. Pike accuses curtains of pride." Anna giggled, then covered her mouth, surprised by her own sound. That night, Clara slept in the small bed beside Anna while wind battered the shutters. She woke once to hear Nathaniel moving quietly in the main room, adding wood to the stove. He did not come near the bedroom door. In the morning, the house smelled of coffee and cornmeal cakes. Nathaniel had gone out before sunrise to clear drifts. Clara watched him from the window. He worked with a shovel, shoulders bent under the pale light. Anna stood beside her, wrapped in a quilt. "He doesn't talk much," Anna said. "No, he talked before." Clara looked down. "Before what?" "Before he came home from the war. Before Mama died. Before people said he let his brother go." The words settled heavily. Nathaniel's brother, Anna's father. Later, when Clara stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee for him, she found Nathaniel staring toward the creek where ice had formed along the banks. "Anna spoke of your brother," she said. His eyes closed briefly. "I did not ask her to. I know." She held out the cup. He took it, warming his hands around it without drinking. "Samuel was younger," he said. "Always quicker, quicker to laugh, quicker to anger, quicker to forgive. He married Mary while I was still east with a cavalry contract. I came back when fever had already entered the valley." His voice stayed even, but each word seemed drawn over wire. "I brought medicine from Fort Laramie. The bridge at Miller's Wash was out. I tried to cross anyway, lost 1 horse, lost half a day. By the time I reached them, Samuel was gone and Mary was near." Anna was under the table, quiet as a mouse. Clara looked toward the barn. where his gray horse stamped. You blame yourself. People help. People are generous with burdens they do not carry. He glanced at her then. She knew she had stepped close to a wound. The old Clara, banker's daughter, polished and careful, might have retreated. But the woman who had slept in a shed and eaten borrowed stew understood that silence could become a second prison. My father left a letter, she said, unfinished. I have read it so many times the creases are tearing. He wrote that accounts had been moved without his consent. He wrote 3 names. Before he could finish, he died. Nathaniel waited. One name was Silas Hop. The wind pressed snow from the porch roof. Nathaniel's gaze sharpened. The train agent? Yes, he worked freight between St. Joseph and Cheyenne before he came here. My father believed bank drafts were being carried west through rail contracts. But the records disappeared. Without proof, his name took the blame. Why didn't you tell the sheriff? I told a deputy in St. Joseph. He asked whether I had proof or only a daughter's grief. Nathaniel's mouth hardened. The letter is in my valise, she said. But a half-written accusation is not evidence. It is only enough to make Silas fear me and townspeople doubt me. Does Hob know you have it? I think he suspects. Nathaniel looked toward the road leading to Mercy Ridge. Then, you should not walk alone. There it was again. Protection, reasonable and suffocating. Clara lifted her chin. I will not be kept like a hidden object because a man once tried to price me in public. No. The single word was firm. She braced for argument. Nathaniel set the coffee cup on the porch rail. You won't be hidden, but you also won't be left undefended while wolves call themselves businessmen. The difference mattered. She wished it did not. 2 days later, the school board dismissed Clara. They did it politely, which only made the cruelty cleaner. Mr. Pritchard, who owned the mercantile and chaired the board, folded his hands on the desk and explained that some parents were uncomfortable. Not with her teaching. The children had improved. Not with her manner. She had been modest and punctual. But rumors had grown. A town must protect its young minds from uncertainty. Uncertainty, Clara repeated. He would not meet her eyes. Your father's banking failure harmed many honest families. Me father is dead. Death survives. Death survives truth. Mr. Pritchard sighed. Miss Whitcomb, you arrived in a scene. That is not entirely your fault. But it is now your circumstance. She left the schoolhouse with her final pay, $1.75. Outside, children watched from the windows. Anna stood among them, one hand pressed to the glass. Clara lifted her hand in farewell. Anna did not wave. Her small face crumpled. At the depot, Silas Hop stood under the awning, smiling. By nightfall, Mercy Ridge had decided Clara Whitcomb was too proud for charity, too stained for children, and too dangerous for respectable homes. Mrs. Bell still offered her the kitchen cot, but Clara knew the Reverend had begun receiving complaints. Kindness could cost a family its standing. Clara refused to make children pay for her shelter. She packed her valise in the wash house while Mrs. Bell wept quietly. You can't sleep outside, Mrs. Bell said. I won't. But Clara did not know where she would sleep. When she stepped into the alley, Nathaniel was waiting with the wagon. Mrs. Bell must have sent word. Clara felt anger rise, then break against exhaustion. I did not ask for a rescue. No, he said. You asked for work once. I still have it. What work? Anna needs lessons. Books need keeping. I have winter accounts I hate enough to pay someone else to face them. The town will talk. Yeah, they already do. Duty will say, I am kept at Cold Creek. Then we make terms public. Wages, room in the old tack room, converted proper, Mrs. Bell as witness. Reverend Bell, if you want a contract signed. Clara stared at him. You thought of all that? I thought you'd need more than a wagon. Snow began again, fine and silver in the lamplight. Clara wanted to refuse because refusal felt like the last coin pride owned. But pride did not teach Anna. Pride did not expose Silas. Pride did not keep a woman warm. Pride, she was learning, was only holy when it guarded dignity, not when it punished need. "I will accept," she said. "Under contract." Nathaniel nodded. "Under contract? And I pay board from wages. You do not answer for me unless I am denied the chance to answer myself." His eyes met hers. "Agreed." She climbed onto the wagon seat beside him. As they drove past the depot, Silas Hobb stepped into the lamplight. For one moment, his polished smile slipped, and Clara saw not contempt but fear. That fear told her her father's unfinished letter had more power than she had believed. Cold Creek became a place where Clara could breathe, but not yet rest. Nathaniel and Reverend Bell spent half a day turning the old tack room into respectable quarters. They moved saddles to the barn loft, scrubbed the plank floor set in a small iron stove, and hung a curtain over the narrow window. Mrs. Bell brought a quilt. Anna placed the blue crack cup on the shelf because, she said, every room needed one thing chosen by someone who wanted you there. Clara nearly wept over the cup. The contract was written in her hand and signed at the Bell kitchen table. Clara Whitcomb would keep accounts for Cold Creek Ranch, tutor Anna Vale, mend household linens, and receive wages every Saturday. Board would be deducted at a fair rate. Either party could end the arrangement with 1 week's notice. It was dry language full of numbers and terms, and Clara loved it because no sentence in it contained pity. Town opinion worsened anyway. At church, women shifted down the pew. Men who owed Nathaniel money suddenly remembered old complaints. Mr. Pritchard stopped extending feed credit to Cold Creek, though he had done so for years after fall cattle sales. Silas Hobb mentioned to anyone who would listen that Nathaniel Vale had taken a banker's daughter into his house under the cover of paperwork. Nathaniel did not defend himself loudly. He paid cash when he could, went without when he could not, and kept giving Clara work that mattered. The ranch books revealed trouble. Cold Creek was not failing, but it was strained. A note on the north pasture came due before spring. Feed costs had risen. 2 buyers had delayed payment. Nathaniel had spent more than he should, helping neighbors through the fever year, though he had marked those sums not as loans, but as delivered. "You don't collect?" Clara asked one evening. They sat at the kitchen table after Anna had gone to bed. The lamp between them made an island of gold in the dark room. "Some debts are paid by people surviving," Nathaniel said. "Banks do not accept survival as currency, no way." She looked at the ledger. "You could lose the north pasture." "I know, and you paid my debt at the depot." He leaned back. $8 didn't lose the pasture, no, but men like Silas use every kindness as evidence of foolishness. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. "My father used to say land is only worth keeping if it teaches you to stand upright on it." "That sounds expensive." "It has been," she smiled faintly, then sobered. "Let me examine the note." "You already keep the books?" "I kept bank ledgers before I kept ranch books." He studied her. "Would that hurt?" "Yes." "Then why offer?" "Because I am more than what hurt me." The words surprised them both. Clara looked down quickly. The note was held by a Cheyenne investment office, but payment was collected through the rail freight agency. Silas Hobbs' initials appeared on 2 receipts. Clara felt cold move through her. "Your pasture note touches rail accounts," she said. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Meaning the same kind of route my father suspected. Private money hidden in transport charges, land liens, freight balances. If Silas helped move stolen drafts west, he might now be using those funds to buy distressed land. Cold Creek and others. Nathaniel stood and took his hat from the peg. "We go to the sheriff." with what similar initials and my suspicion. She closed the ledger. No, we need records from the depot. The depot office locks at night. Yes, he looked at her almost stern. That was not an invitation to burglary. It was an observation. For the first time, a real smile touched his mouth. It vanished quickly, but Clara saw it and stored it away like warmth. The chance came during the worst storm of December. A freight car derailed 2 miles east of town, blocking the track and sending half of Mercy Ridge men into the weather with lanterns and ropes. Silas Hobb rode out with them, leaving the depot office under the care of a junior clerk, barely old enough to shave. Nathaniel came home after dusk, soaked to the skin, and found Clara at the table with her coat on. "Anna is with Mrs. Bell," she said. He looked at her coat. "Why? Because Silas is away from the depot." "No, you haven't heard the plan." "I heard the coat, Nathaniel. Those records might clear my father's name and save your land. And if you're caught, it confirms every lie told about you. If I do nothing, the lies win politely." He removed his wet hat and set it down. His hair was dark with rain. His face held the kind of fear men hide by making rules. "I won't let you risk yourself for my pasture," he said. "I am not yours to let." Pain flickered across his face, and she regretted the words, but not the truth behind them. He stepped aside from the door. "Then I go with you." "Ah, you are caught. Silas will say, 'You stole for me.' If you are caught, he will do worse than say." They stared at each other while wind shook the house. Trust, Clara realized, was not always peace. Sometimes it was two people fighting to take the greater danger. They rode to town in the wagon with no lantern. Snow blew so thick, the horse knew more of the road than they did. Mercy Ridge was half empty. Its men east at the derailment, its women behind shuttered windows. At the depot, the junior clerk slept in a chair near the stove, hat over his face. Clara's hands shook as she opened the side window with a hairpin, and Nathaniel lifted her through. She had never stolen anything in her life, yet the office smelled of paper, coal, and Silas Bay rum. And in that smell, her fear hardened into purpose. "Freight ledgers," she whispered. Nathaniel stood by the door, listening. She found them in the lower cabinet. Bound books marked by month, with cargo entries, private transfers, land note receipts, and names written in various hands. Elias Whitcomb appeared 3 times, not as sender, but as objector. Beside one disputed draft was a notation. EWW. Refused final approval. Override by SH and CM. Authorize. CM. Clara knew the name from her father's unfinished letter. Cyrus Morrow, a land speculator based in Cheyenne. Her breath caught. Nathaniel crossed to her. "You found it?" "Part of it." Then the office door opened. Silas Hobb stepped inside, snow on his shoulders and triumph in his eyes. "Well," he said softly, "the banker's blood runs true." Behind him stood Sheriff Calder and 2 railmen. Nathaniel moved in front of Clara. Silas smiled, breaking into the rail office, stealing records, and Mr. Vale assisting. "Mercy Ridge will finally understand what kind of woman you bought." Clara clutched the ledger to her chest. Her heart hammered so hard she could barely hear the stove. Sheriff Calder looked tired and unhappy. "Miss Whitcomb, set the book down." "No." Nathaniel spoke low. "Clara," she looked at him. If she set it down, Silas would bury it. If she held it, she would be called thief. Either way, the town would watch her stand accused. So she did the one thing shame had never allowed. She stepped out from behind Nathaniel. "I took this ledger," she said clearly. "Mr. Vale did not ask me to. He tried to stop me. The records inside show why Silas Hobb humiliated me at this depot, why my father died disgraced, and why half this town might lose land to men who first stole their savings." Silas laughed. "A thief making speeches. Nathaniel took the receipt from his coat pocket, the receipt from the day of the depot auction, folded and worn. He held it up. This man tried to sell her labor in public before any court declared her debtor. He said, I paid because no woman should be priced for man's amusement. If that makes me foolish, write it down. But write down the rest too. Sheriff Calder's gaze moved from Nathaniel to the ledger. He hesitated. Then a small voice came from the open door. Miss Clara taught me to write my name. Anna stood there with Mrs. Bell behind her, both covered in snow. Reverend Bell followed, carrying a lantern. Anna stepped into the office, trembling but determined. She said names belong to people, not gossip, so you can't let Mr. Hop make hers bad if there's proof. No one moved. Mrs. Bell placed a hand on Anna's shoulder. Sheriff, I believe you should read the book before returning it. Silas' face flushed. This is real property. Reverend Bell lifted the lantern. Truth is not property. The sheriff took the ledger from Clara, but gently. Silas saw the shift. His hand moved toward the drawer where he kept a pistol. Nathaniel saw it first. He shoved Clara behind him as Silas drew. The gunshot cracked inside the small office, deafening and bright. The lamp shattered. Clara screamed. Nathaniel staggered but did not fall. Sheriff Calder struck Silas' arm down, and the second shot went into the floor. The railman seized him. For one terrible moment, Clara could not find Nathaniel's blood. Then she saw it, darkening his left sleeve. Nathaniel, I am standing, he said, though his face had gone gray. The quiet cowboy, who had once stopped an auction without raising his voice, now stood bleeding between Clara and the man who had tried to own her shame. She pressed both hands to his arm, holding tight, not caring who saw. This is not your debt, she whispered. His eyes found hers. Some things are worth paying toward. The trial did not happen in a grand courthouse, because Mercy Ridge had no grand courthouse. It happened in the church hall 3 weeks before Christmas, with snow piled against the windows and every bench filled. By then, Nathaniel's arm was bound in a sling. Silas Hop was locked in the sheriff's back room, and Cyrus Morrow had been arrested in Cheyenne after Sheriff Calder sent copies of the depot ledger east and west. More records followed: bank drafts, false freight charges, land note purchased with stolen funds. Elias Whitcomb's objections had been mocked, overridden, and hidden. The truth did not bring back the money quickly. Truth rarely arrives with full pockets, but it changed the direction of blame. Clara sat at the front of the hall with her father's unfinished letter in her lap. Her dress was still plain, her shoes were still worn, but her name no longer felt like a stone tied around her neck. Sheriff Calder read from the evidence in a voice rough with embarrassment. He admitted that he had dismissed Clara's claims because she was poor, female, and connected to scandal. Mr. Pritchard admitted that the school board had acted on rumor. Mrs. Pike admitted nothing, but she stopped glaring after Mrs. Bell stared at her long enough. Silas Hop was brought in under guard. He looked smaller without his watch chain. His lawyer argued that Clara had broken into the depot, that Nathaniel had assisted. The evidence obtained through desperation should be questioned. Clara stood before anyone could stop her. Yes, she said. I entered the depot office without permission. I did it because the law had already refused to hear me when I came empty-handed. Punish me if you must, but do not confuse my wrong with his crimes. I stole a look at the truth. He stole names, land, savings, and dignity. The hall was silent. Then Nathaniel rose beside her. His sling pulled at his shoulder. Pain showed in the set of his mouth, but his voice held. I helped her, he said. Not enough at first. I thought paying a debt and offering work were protection. They were only beginnings. Respect means standing where the cost can reach you. So let any charge against her include me. Clara turned to him. Nathaniel, no. He looked back, steady as the day on the platform. You said I don't answer for you unless you are denied the chance. You've answered. Now I answer for myself. It was not a confession of love, not in the way songs would shape it. It was better. It was a public vow made before judgment, without demand, without ownership, without asking her to become smaller so he could appear noble. The judge, who had ridden from the county seat, listened to all of it with tired patience. In the end, Silas Hobb was bound over for trial on fraud, coercion, assault, and conspiracy. Cyrus Morrow's holdings were frozen. The land notes he had purchased under false accounts, including Cold Creek's North Pasture, were suspended pending review. Clara and Nathaniel were fined $1 each for unlawful entry, a sentence the judge delivered while looking as though he would rather fine the whole town for foolishness. Mercy Ridge did not transform in an hour. Towns, like hearts, resist admitting they were wrong. But after the hearing, Mr. Pritchard approached Clara on the church steps. "The school board would consider your return," he said stiffly. Clara looked at the children waiting nearby. Anna stood among them, chin lifted. "I will consider the board's apology first," Clara replied. Mrs. Bell coughed into her glove. Nathaniel looked away, but Clara saw the smile he tried to hide. Work came after that. Real work. The county needed someone to help sort claims against the stolen bank drafts, and Clara's knowledge of ledgers made her useful. She spent mornings at a desk in the sheriff's office, writing careful letters to families who had believed every cent gone forever. Some would recover little, some would recover enough to keep land. All deserved answers. In the afternoons, she returned to Cold Creek. Winter deepened. Snow lay smooth over the valley. The creek froze at the edges, but kept a black ribbon moving through the white. Nathaniel healed slowly and hated being idle. Clara found him one morning trying to carry firewood one-handed. "You are a foolish man," she said. "I've been told I'm quiet. Quiet foolishness is still foolishness." He surrendered the wood with grave dignity. They learned each other in those months through ordinary things. Nathaniel learned Clara took coffee with no sugar. Because she preferred bitterness, she chose herself. Clara learned Nathaniel sang under his breath only when working with horses. Anna learned that adults could disagree without leaving. The house learned new sounds. Clara turning pages by lamplight. Anna reading aloud. Nathaniel laughing once in surprise when Clara beat him at checkers and accused his strategy of excessive honesty. On Christmas Eve, Mercy Ridge held a service at the church. Candles lined the windows. Snow fell in gray slow flakes beyond the glass. Clara wore a dark green dress Mrs. Bell had altered from one of her own. Nathaniel wore his black coat, brushed clean, his sling finally gone. Anna sat between them, holding both their hands as if anchoring the world. After the service, the town gathered outside around lanterns and sleigh bells. People spoke to Clara carefully now, some from guilt, some from true change. She accepted what was sincere and let the rest pass. Silas Hobbs' depot office stood dark across the street. A new agent had been appointed. A widow named Mrs. Gaines who kept receipts in perfect order and tolerated no loitering men. The platform where Clara had been humiliated lay under snow, its boards silver beneath moonlight. Clara walked toward it without meaning to. Nathaniel followed but did not crowd her. She stopped at the place where she had stood barefoot, valise in the agent's hand. The crowd measuring her worth. "I thought this place would always own part of me," she said. Nathaniel stood beside her. "Does it?" She looked at the snow. "No, but I remember the woman who stood here. I want to be kind to her. She was brave. She was hungry. Both can be true." Clara turned to him. "You stopped the auction." His face tightened at the word, as if it still angered him. "I stopped a man talking." "No," she said. "You stopped me from believing his price." The wind moved between them. From the churchyard came Anna's laughter as Ruth Bell chased her through snow. Lantern light warmed the street. The town that had once watched Clara's disgrace now watched from a distance. uncertain whether it had the right to witness her peace. Nathaniel removed his hat. "Clara," he said, and her name in his mouth held no debt at all. "I have no wish to claim what isn't freely given. I have a house that was empty before you and Anna filled it with arguments about grammar and too many ledgers. I have land I might keep, and if I lose it someday, I'll still know what it was for. I have respect for you that came before tenderness and tenderness that grew because of respect." Her eyes blurred. He continued, quiet but clear. "If you want your own room at Cold Creek as long as you need it, it is yours. If you want wages and nothing more, they are yours. If you want to leave, I will hitch the wagon and take you wherever the road allows. But if one day you want my name beside yours, not over it, not instead of it, beside it, then I would be honored to spend my life proving the difference." Clara had imagined proposals when she was younger. Parlors, flowers, polished words. She had never imagined snow on a depot platform and a cowboy offering her every door, including the one that led away from him. That was why she could answer. "I do not need rescue now," she said. "I know. I do not need a man to pay my debts. I know." She stepped closer. "But I would like a home where help is not a chain. I would like Anna's blue cup on my shelf. I would like your name beside mine, if you will take mine beside yours with all its history." Nathaniel's breath left him slowly. "Yes," he said. No cheer rose from the town. No bell rang at that exact moment. The world did not perform for them. It simply held still while two wounded people chose each other without bargain. Then Anna saw their hands join and came running. "Bias is settled," she cried. Clara laughed through tears, some of it enough for Christmas. Nathaniel looked at Clara, and the tenderness in his eyes was no longer hidden beneath quiet. Enough for a start. Spring came months later with mud, calves, and the first green pushing through the valley. Clara returned to teaching part-time after the school board apologized in writing at her insistence and posted the apology where the public notices hung. She kept ranch accounts in the evenings and county claims twice a week. Her father's name was not restored everywhere, but it was restored where proof could reach, and that was enough for grief to loosen its grip. She and Nathaniel married in May under the cottonwoods by Cold Creek. Mrs. Bell cried openly. Reverend Bell forgot one line and pretended he had not. Anna carried wildflowers and the rings, walking with such seriousness that half the guests cried before Clara reached the creek bank. Clara wore no silk. She wore a simple cream dress she had sewn herself, with blue ribbon at the cuffs from the bundle that had once tied her father's letters. Nathaniel wore the same boots he had worn the day he stepped onto the depot platform, polished until they nearly shone. After the vows, Mr. Pritchard approached with a gift, a new slate for Anna and a ledger for Clara, bound in red leather. "For honest accounts," he said awkwardly. Clara accepted it. "Then I will use it carefully." Later, when the meal was done and music drifted from the porch, Clara walked alone for a moment to the wagon where her old valise rested. It had carried the last pieces of her ruined life into Mercy Ridge. Its handle was cracked. Its leather was scarred. She ran her fingers over it with gratitude, not sorrow. Nathaniel joined her. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "Home." Across the yard, Anna was placing the blue cracked cup on the kitchen windowsill of the ranch house, declaring it must be visible for luck. The north pasture rolled beyond the barn, green and safe for another season. The creek caught the evening light and turned it gold. Clara looked toward the distant town. Somewhere beyond the ridge lay the depot platform where a train agent had tried to sell her shame to the highest bidder. But that was not the final picture Mercy Ridge would keep. The final picture was this: a woman once priced in public standing freely beside a quiet cowboy, her hand in his, her name restored not by money alone, but by courage, work, truth, and love. A child laughing from the porch, a house no longer empty, and the long western sun laying warm light over Cold Creek, as if the whole prairie had decided that dignity once defended could become home.